You were never taught this, but your thoughts are not just yours. They travel, they imprint, they ripple out into a field that remembers everything. There is a secret substance that connects all things. Not matter, not energy, something deeper. The ancients called it Aether, the invisible breath of the cosmos. It's what fills the space between stars, between atoms, between you and God. But it was erased, not because it was false, but because it was too true. Because if you understood what the ether really was, you'd understand how reality is being manipulated. You'd understand how consciousness is not trapped inside your skull, but woven into everything. Hermeticism was never a dead philosophy. It was encoded rebellion, a map of how the soul reclaims its throne. This is not just a story of wisdom, it's a story of war between the light of the divine mind and the shadows of the Archons that hijacked it. They don't want you to know what you're part of. But now, it's time to remember. Welcome to the hidden voyage. There are truths that sleep for centuries, not because they are weak, but because they are waiting for the right soul to hear them again. Long before the world was carved into empires, before science and scripture divorced the sky from the spirit, there were those who spoke of one mind, one source, one silent pulse beneath the chaos. They were not priests, not scientists, not kings. They were something else entirely. Observers of pattern, students of the stars, masters of symbol. They called it Hermeticism, but it wasn't a religion. It was remembrance, a system of knowing so powerful that it had to be hidden in myth, coded in alchemy, and sealed in silence. The name comes from Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great messenger said to be a fusion of the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek Hermes, a being not just of knowledge, but of transmission, the sacred in motion, the scribe of the gods who wrote not in ink, but in the fire of symbols that unlocked the cosmos. The earliest Hermetic texts spoke of a universe alive with spirit, not a cold machine, but a reflection of divine thought. What's above is like what's below. What's inside is like what's outside, and nothing, not even death, is separate from the all. This was not just poetry, it was precision. But precision, in the wrong hands, becomes threat. And as the empires of control rose, the knowledge was buried, not lost, just hidden, like gold beneath stone, waiting. Now, the symbols are waking again. Because in this fractured world, where meaning has been drained from life, the Hermetic current is whispering louder. You didn't find this message by accident. It found you because some part of you still remembers. And the journey has only just begun. They say it was carved in green fire, that it was found clutched in the hands of a dead prophet, buried beneath the sands of Egypt, or hidden in a secret chamber under the Great Pyramid. But no one agrees on where the emerald tablet came from, because the truth is, it came from somewhere older than place. It came from memory, from the silence before sound, and those who were ready could feel it before they read it. 12 lines. That's all it took to rewire the mind of anyone who truly understood. Not a book, not a scroll, just a slab, etched with the laws that govern everything. As above, so below. As within, so without. The sun is its father, the moon its mother. These weren't metaphors. They were coordinates, sacred physics encoded in poetry. Because the only way to hide truth from the profane was to make it sound like mysticism. The Emerald Tablet is said to have been written by Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great. But Hermes wasn't just a man. he was a current, a consciousness that moved through sages, magi, alchemists, whispering through symbols what the soul had forgotten. To the initiated, the tablet wasn't just an object. It was a mirror, a reflection of how the cosmos breathes. It explained how the all divided itself, became light, vibration, form, and then circled back again to itself. It was the sacred cycle, the Ouroboros, the rising of the one through the many, until the many remembered they were never separate. When Isaac Newton translated the Emerald Tablet in the 17th century, he didn't see it as superstition. He called it the secret of the world. A scientist, yes, but also an alchemist, because the true seekers knew. This wasn't fantasy, it was foundation. And still, modern minds dismissed it, called it cryptic, mythical, irrelevant, because it couldn't be measured in labs or cut into pieces. But what they didn't realize was, you don't dissect the sacred, you embody it. The Emerald Tablet was never meant to be studied like a relic. It was meant to be lived like a prayer, a riddle whose answer could only be found by becoming the question. And that question still echoes in the silence between your thoughts. What if reality isn't built from matter, but from meaning? What if the symbols are alive, and the tablet was always speaking to you, not to your logic, to your remembrance? Because when you finally understand what the tablet is pointing to, you won't need to read it anymore. You'll see it in the sky, in the breath, in the mirror, and the stone will whisper back, that which is below is like that which is above. Before the void was just emptiness, it was something sacred. The ancients did not believe in empty space. To them, the cosmos wasn't floating in nothing. It was suspended in spirit, wrapped in an invisible body so subtle, so intelligent, that it carried the will of God like breath carries a whisper. They called it Ether, the fifth element, beyond earth, water, air, and fire. This was the medium of the divine, not physical, not just energy, something in between, a bridge between realms. In India, it was called Akasha, the unseen field that holds all memory. In Egypt, it was the Nwai, the formless waters in which creation stirred. To the Greeks, ether was the pure air the gods breathed. Not metaphor, not myth, but the most real substance of all. Because in Hermetic thought, form is only possible because of formlessness. Like ink on parchment, sound in silence, or light in space, everything is held by something deeper, but something changed. Not in nature, in our minds. In the rise of mechanistic science, the sacred was severed from the seen. The thinkers of the Enlightenment no longer asked why, only how. Only what could be tested, sliced, measured, controlled. By the 19th century, physicists still spoke of ether as the invisible medium through which light traveled. They believed it filled all space, that it was necessary for waves to move. But then came the Michelson-Morley experiment, a failure to detect ether by material instruments, and with that came its erasure. Einstein's theory of relativity didn't require ether, and slowly, what had once been the soul of the cosmos was reduced to a superstition. But what they didn't understand was that ether was never meant to be found outside, because ether doesn't obey force. It responds to frequency. It is the spiritual substrate of the universe, the thing that listens, that remembers, that moves when mind moves. Hermeticism never stopped believing, because those who practiced the old ways knew you can remove the word from a textbook, but you can't remove it from the field. Every time you think, pray, breathe with intention, You are moving through the ether. It is the field of forms, the substance of synchronicity, the canvas on which the divine mind paints its dream. And now, science is circling back with quantum fields, zero-point energy, non-local entanglement. They are rediscovering what was always here, because the ether didn't disappear. It was hidden behind the veil of what we thought was real, and now that veil is thinning, because the soul remembers what science forgot. There is no matter without mind, no form without thought, no world without will. This is the first Hermetic principle. All is mind, not metaphor, not abstraction, but the literal structure of everything you call real. The Hermetic teachings begin here, because this truth reshapes everything that follows. Before atoms, before energy, before light, there was consciousness, not human, not personal, but vast, silent, self-aware. The ancients called it the All, not a god in the clouds, but the source that thinks through existence, the divine mind. And from that mind, creation unfurled like a dream from a sleeper. Each layer of reality spiraling from thought into pattern, from pattern into vibration, from vibration into form. Modern science tries to start at the material, working backwards to explain life. But Hermeticism begins where the ancients always began, with awareness, with the unseen cause, because what we call the world is the echo of a thought in the mind of the all. Your body, a condensation of intention. Your memories, ripples in the field of mind. Even time itself is just how consciousness learns to witness itself in sequence. This principle is not a theory, it's a map. And the map tells us your thoughts are not contained in your skull. They are radiant, active, electric. You are not a drop inside the ocean of mind. You are a wave, shaped by it and shaping it in return. Every belief becomes architecture. Every expectation, a doorway. Every emotion, a sculptor. This is why magicians and mystics understood that the outer world was malleable. Not because they could break the laws of physics, but because they understood the deeper laws that create physics. If you think the world is hostile, your mind bends reality to confirm it. If you believe you are unworthy, the patterns around you collapse to match. But if you remember that you are a thought of the divine, then your very presence becomes sacred geometry. The first principle was hidden not because it was weak, but because it was unstoppable. Because if every soul knew the power of their consciousness, the empires of control would vanish overnight. Hermeticism didn't just tell you the truth, it gave you the manual to turn awareness into energy, to turn thought into experience, to turn reality into revelation. Because mind is not just the beginning, it is the mirror. And when you realize that you are not inside the universe, but the universe is inside you, you don't need to control the world. You only need to remember how it's created, and it always begins with thought. You've heard it before, as above, so below. It sounds poetic, mysterious, but few understand how literal it truly is. This isn't just a clever phrase, it's a code, a key, a law of correspondence etched into the fabric of everything, from the structure of your cells to the spirals of galaxies. The Hermetic masters knew this law wasn't just symbolic. It was anatomical, cosmological, spiritual, because what exists in the heavens also echoes in your body, and what you carry in your soul is reflected in the motion of the stars. The ancients saw no division between spirit and matter, between the divine and the mundane. To them, every layer of reality was nested, like mirrors reflecting mirrors, each one vibrating with the same archetypal intelligence. Look closer. Your spine mirrors the staff of Hermes, the Caduceus, serpents of energy winding upward, wings ready to take flight. Your breath rises and falls like the tides. Your heart beats in rhythm with the Schumann resonance, the pulse of the earth itself. And your mind? It receives impressions not just from memory, but from the higher spheres. As above, so below means the temple is not just in the sky. It's in your skin, in your blood, in the silence between your thoughts. This is why initiates train to master both worlds, the inner and the outer, because they knew the two were not separate. You do not just observe the cosmos, you participate in it. The motion of your will shapes the form of your reality, and it moves both ways. Not only does the divine echo into the earthly, but the earthly can rise and touch the divine. Your emotions ripple into the field. Your intentions alter probability. Your rituals rewrite your resonance. When you purify your lower self, you align with your higher self. When you bring harmony to your physical life, you awaken your spiritual vision. This is the alchemy of correspondence, where heaven bends to meet the earth, and earth rises to become like heaven. That's why the Emerald Tablet also says, "That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below," to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. The one thing, not two worlds, not two powers. One current flowing through all forms. The duality was only ever an illusion, a veil, because in truth there is no above and below, only one reflected through many. And when you see this, you stop looking up for God and start looking through everything, even your own eyes. Close your eyes, take a breath. Now ask yourself, is what you see all that exists? Or is there something else, hovering just outside perception? Not fiction, not hallucination, but life, without body, presence, without form. The Hermetic tradition never taught that humans are alone. Quite the opposite. It spoke of a cosmos teeming with intelligence, some luminous, some deceptive, all woven into the structure of reality itself. The material world is not the full picture. It's only the surface. Beneath it, above it, around it, are layers of subtle realms. The astral, the causal, the mental. Each one vibrating at a different frequency. Each one home to beings. Some are elementals, the raw forces of nature given consciousness. Fire spirits, wind messengers, earth keepers. They are not metaphor. They are energies with purpose, guardians of balance and flow. Others are watchers. They observe, they guide, they intervene when the soul is ready. Hermeticists and mystics have always described encounters with these intelligences, not as ghosts or gods, but as reflections of the higher laws. Teachers, messengers, sometimes protectors. And then there are the Archons. They are not demons in the cartoon sense. They are distortions of will, interference patterns in the field, born not from divine creation, but from separation, from fear, from the mind that forgets it is part of the one. The Gnostics warned of them. Hermetic sages recognize their influence. They do not create, they mimic. They do not inspire, they distract. Their power lies not in force, but in suggestion, in illusion, in systems of belief that keep the soul looping in fear and division. The Archons whisper through institutions, through media, through self-doubt. Their goal is not possession, but disconnection. to keep the lower self sealed off from its divine spark. But they can only manipulate what remains unexamined. The moment you remember who you are, the spell begins to break, because not all beings are enemies, and not all helpers come in light. Hermeticism teaches discernment, to feel with the inner eye, to recognize signature, to know the difference between resonance and mimicry, between the real and the reflected. We are not at the top of creation. We are within it, and all around us, the dance of consciousness continues. Some to elevate, some to test, some to remind us that the path of awakening is not walked alone. You may not see them, but you have felt them, in the dreams you can't forget, in the chills that speak louder than words, in the moments that rearrange your entire life, because between the worlds, something is always watching. He was never just one man, not born, not buried, but remembered, in many names, through many ages. To the Egyptians, he was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, language, and sacred geometry, the one who measured the stars and weighed the souls of the dead. He carved time into rhythm and gave speech to silence. To the Greeks, he became Hermes, messenger of the gods, crossing freely between worlds, a traveler between heaven and earth, mind and matter, life and death. And to the mystics of every generation, he was known as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, great in wisdom, great in speech, great in power. But what does that truly mean? The Hermetic texts say he lived before the flood, that he received divine knowledge not from study, but from direct revelation. He didn't theorize about God. He spoke with it, face to face, mind to mind. They say the stars themselves taught him, that the hidden laws of the cosmos were given, not as commandments, but as reflections. He saw the unity beneath all opposites. He understood that creation was not a place but a process, and that to master it, one must first master the self. Hermes Trismegistus became the blueprint for sages, alchemists, magi, and initiates. He was quoted by medieval mystics, revered by Islamic scholars, honored by Christian Kabbalists. Even in the Renaissance, philosophers claimed his writings were older than Moses, because the wisdom he carried felt eternal, not born from culture, but from consciousness itself. He taught that all things are one, that the divine is mind, and that man is not a sinner to be saved, but a soul to be remembered. He spoke of the stars not as fate, but as reflections of the soul's journey. He taught that the body is a temple, that thought shapes matter, and that the word is the seed of all creation. Some say he never existed, that Hermes Trismegistus is a myth, a symbol, a merging of legends. But the Hermetic initiate knows better, because Hermes is not a man. He is a frequency, a current of divine intelligence that incarnates when the world forgets. He comes through the dreamers, the poets, the scientists who remember God, the rebels who speak truth from silence. And every time humanity begins to fracture, Hermes returns, not always with a name, but always with a flame, a whisper, a mirror, a path back to the all. Because the teacher was never outside you. He was waiting, in the part of you that never forgot. And now that part is waking up. They told you alchemy was about turning lead into gold, about secret labs and strange powders, about men in robes chasing immortality in flasks. But that was the decoy, the distraction, the veil, because the real alchemy was never about metal. It was about you, about the dark inside you, that longs to become light. The ancient alchemists weren't just chemists, they were mystics, and their furnaces weren't for wealth. They were for purification. Lead was a symbol of ignorance, of heaviness, of the self trapped in illusion. Gold, that was illumination, awakened soul, the light body, forged in the fire of truth. The texts spoke in riddles, because they had to, because only those who could see through symbols were ready for the transformation. Solve et coagula, separate then reunite, break down the false self, so the true essence can rise. In the old Hermetic schools, the alchemical process mirrored the journey of the soul. Calcination, the burning away of ego. Dissolution, the surrender of control. Separation, the discernment of what is real. Conjunction, the uniting of higher and lower selves. Fermentation, the birth of spiritual vision. Distillation, the refinement of wisdom. Coagulation, the rebirth of the divine self into form. These weren't just steps in a lab. They were initiations, trials, deaths and rebirths of consciousness. The lead wasn't out there. It was inside, in the density of thought, in the weight of trauma, in the patterns passed down through generations. And the gold was never meant to be held. It was meant to be embodied, a state of being, a radiance that comes when the soul remembers what it is. In the words of Zosimos, one of the earliest alchemists, the process is a spiritual sacrifice, a mystery of transformation, a vision of the divine within the body. He saw the alchemical vessel not just as glass, but as the human form, the furnace of experience, the sacred container where spirit awakens in flesh. True alchemy is not escape, it's transmutation. It's taking the shadow and folding it back into light, not denying your humanity, but refining it until it reflects the all. And that's why it was hidden, why the kings and conquerors misunderstood it, because you can't sell what cannot be owned. You can't conquer what is eternal, and you can't fake the gold that glows from within. You don't become an alchemist by studying the fire. You become one by walking through it, until one day you look into the mirror and no longer see the weight of who you were. You see light shaped into form, knowing itself as divine. The sky is not just decoration, it's a language, a staircase, a map the soul has followed since before time had a name. In the ancient Hermetic world, the planets were not just celestial bodies, they were gates. Each one a veil, a lesson, a trial in the soul's journey, both outward into incarnation and inward, back to the source. The 7 classical planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon, were more than points of light. They were living intelligences, spheres of influence, keepers of spiritual frequency. Each governed a level of the soul's initiation. Each shaped the mind, the body, the emotions. And when the soul descended from the one, it passed through them, taking on layers of form, forgetting, bit by bit. First came Saturn, the gate of time and limitation. It pressed the soul into matter, into density, into memory. Then Jupiter, law, expansion, belief, the architecture of thought, the kingdom the soul would learn to rule or be ruled by. Then Mars, fire, desire, will, the furnace of action, the lesson of power and restraint. Then the sun, the radiant center, the heart, the divine spark that never fully dimmed. Then Venus, beauty, union, attraction, the longing to return to what was never truly lost. Then Mercury, intellect, language, magic, the bridge between realms, the whisperer of codes. And finally, the Moon, emotion, reflection, embodiment, the veil of incarnation, the mirror that makes illusion look real. Through these gates, the soul entered earth, layered in forgetfulness, wrapped in karma, cradled by form, and yet still luminous, still carrying the imprint of the stars. The ancients taught that at death, the journey reverses. The soul ascends through the same gates, shedding what it had gathered. Each planet now a challenge, a test. Can you let go of the mind, the desire, the fear of death? Can you remember who you were before the descent? In Gnostic and Hermetic texts, this ascent was not metaphor. It was the real map of spiritual liberation. The planets were not fate, they were filters. And the purpose of astrology was not prediction, but remembrance, to understand your soul's curriculum, to see which gates still bind you, which energies you must balance, integrate, transcend. The wise didn't blame the stars. They read them, not as chains, but as signposts. Because when you align your inner world with the rhythms of the sky, you awaken the forgotten bridge between microcosm and macrocosm, and the gates begin to open, not out there, but within, until one day you look to the heavens and realize they were never above you. They were inside you all along. Your thoughts don't stay in your head. They travel, they vibrate, they shape. This is not poetry, it's mechanics. The deeper physics the ancients understood, long before the modern world had words for it. Hermeticism teaches that all is mind, and from mind comes vibration, and from vibration comes form. So when you think, you are not just imagining. You are moving energy. You are sending currents into the invisible that begin to organize the visible. This is the forgotten art of directed thought. In ancient Hermetic schools, students weren't taught to believe. They were taught to focus, to wield the mind like a sacred instrument, to vibrate in harmony with the outcomes they desired, not through emotion alone, but through alignment. Because the universe doesn't respond to begging, it responds to resonance. You don't get what you want, you get what you are in vibration. So how do you become that? First, by stillness. The alchemist begins with silence, not to escape the world, but to tune to it. Stillness is not absence, it is the womb of intention. Then concentration, not scattered thinking, not worry disguised as planning, but precise, unwavering focus, like light through a lens, burning through illusion. Visualize not just the image, but the feeling state behind it. Hermetic masters called this the seed of manifestation. You must feel the pattern into existence. See it, breathe it, believe it into the ether, because the ether listens, and it doesn't care about fantasy. It reacts to frequency, to certainty. Next comes word, spoken thought, not idle talk, but sacred utterance. Every syllable charged with clarity. This is why mantras, affirmations, and incantations were always part of the ancient rites, because words are vibration, and vibration creates shape. But the final key is action, not frantic doing. Aligned action. Move in the direction of the reality you've summoned, as if it's already true, because to the universe, belief and reality are the same signal. This isn't about control, it's about co-creation. The ego demands, but the awakened mind partners with the field. It listens, it adjusts, it dances with the unseen. And when your thoughts, emotions, words, and actions form one unified signal, the world begins to shift, not always instantly, but undeniably. This is the Hermetic path of manifestation, not magic tricks, not wishful thinking, but the sacred science of energy, guided by will, anchored in vision, and lifted by soul. because when the mind remembers its true power, the world remembers its true form, and the veil begins to obey, the dreamer behind the dream. You were never separate, not from the stars, not from the angels, not from the source. You were part of a chain, not the kind that binds, but the kind that connects. Each link a realm, each realm a reflection. The ancients called it the Great Chain of Being. Hermeticists, Neoplatonists, and mystics across the world all saw reality not as chaos, but as a spectrum, a radiant cascade of intelligence flowing from the one into the many. At the highest point is the all, pure consciousness, unknowable, undivided. It is not a being, but being itself, not light, but the source from which light is born. From that source comes the nous, the divine mind, the first emanation. It holds the blueprint of all that is to come. From the mind emerges the world soul, the living pulse that animates the cosmos. It breathes life into form, motion into matter, order into possibility. And from the soul radiate the celestial beings, the intelligences, the logoi, the angels. They are not characters with wings. They are forces, principles, movements of the divine will, each governing realms of existence, each transmitting light down the ladder of creation. Then come the planetary spirits, the daemonic intermediaries, the archetypes and guardians. They shape the qualities of soul. They whisper through emotion, through synchronicity, through fate. Below them, the human realm, where spirit and matter meet, where memory is dim, but the spark still burns. And beneath humanity, the animals, the plants, the stones, all sacred, all part of the descent of spirit into density. This is not hierarchy in the way we think of power. It is order. Each layer contains the one above it, just as light contains color, and color contains shadow. You, as a human being, stand at the center of this chain. You are the pivot point, with the capacity to look downward in instinct or upward in illumination. Hermeticism teaches that to ascend, you must remember the link, not reject the lower, but integrate it with awareness. You are not trapped in the chain. You are the climber, the bridge, the one who can rise consciously, back through the spheres, to the source you never truly left. This is the sacred architecture of existence. And once you begin to see it, in myth, in symbol, in nature, in yourself, you understand that everything is alive, everything is placed, and nothing is alone. You are not at the bottom. You are not at the top. You are the thread, in a tapestry of light, the voice, in a symphony of souls, and the only way out is through. Didn't die naturally. It was buried, erased, not because it was false, but because it was too true. There was once a time when the soul of the cosmos was not questioned, when the stars moved through spirit and breath itself was holy, when space was not empty, but alive. That essence was ether, the fifth element, the bridge between the visible and the unseen. It wasn't superstition, it was the foundation. From Aristotle to the mystics of Egypt, from Vedic sages to early Christian seers, ether was known. It was the substance of the gods, the field of memory, the luminous fabric that held creation together. But everything changed when the world stopped asking why and started obsessing over how. With the rise of modern science, spirit became suspect. Only what could be measured was considered real. Only what could be dissected was trusted. Only what could be repeated in the lab was allowed to exist. And so came the mechanistic worldview, a clockwork universe run by lifeless parts, where consciousness was an accident and meaning was illusion. In this new vision, ether had no place. The Michelson-Morley experiment in 1887 was the dagger. Designed to detect ether, it found nothing, or so they thought. And in that absence, the element was declared dead. But absence is not the same as non-existence. You can't measure music by smashing the violin. You can't detect the soul with a scalpel. Still, the verdict was passed. Textbooks rewrote the story. Ether was now myth, dust, and the world fell silent, not because truth disappeared, but because it was no longer allowed to speak. Yet the mystics never stopped listening. They knew ether could not be found in test tubes, because it exists beneath thought. It is the breath between things, the medium through which mind moves matter, the field where prayer becomes pattern, where intention becomes form. Today, we give it new names: the zero-point field, the quantum vacuum, the unified field. Science, inching backward into mystery, now finds echoes of what was once thrown away, because ether was never gone, it was just silenced. And the war wasn't just on spirit, it was on connection, on the idea that life responds to thought, that the universe is participatory, that consciousness is not a side effect, but the source. The war on ether was a war on wonder, on intuition, on the sacred bond between inner and outer. But the veil is thinning, and the old whispers are returning. You can feel it when your thoughts ripple the room, when emotion shifts the air, when silence becomes presence. The ether didn't lose, it just waited, and now it's rising again. It appeared like a whisper from another age, a slim black book, unsigned, mysterious, a voice echoing across the divide between forgotten wisdom and a world starving for meaning. The Kybalion. Published in 1908, written under the pseudonym The Three Initiates. This book became the spark that reignited Hermeticism for the modern world. It arrived at a strange time. Science had declared spirit dead, religion had become dogma, and the occult revival was swelling. A hunger for something more ancient, more true. The Kybalion claimed to reveal the core teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, 7 principles that governed all reality: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, gender, simple, clear, digestible. And that's what made it so powerful and so limited. For many seekers, it was a doorway, a glimpse into a universe of pattern and thought. It taught that reality was mental, that consciousness creates form, that nothing rests, everything vibrates, that every action has a cause, every shadow its mirror. It spoke of balance, of opposites, of rhythm and return, and it gave language to the invisible. But the Kybalion was not scripture. It was a distillation, a reworking. Its authors were likely connected to the New Thought movement, and you can feel it in the tone. It speaks more like a manual than a mystery. Gone is the poetry of the corpus hermeticum. Gone is the direct voice of the divine. Gone is the ecstatic reverence. That turned alchemy into prayer. In its place, a framework, useful, yes, but incomplete. Because Hermeticism was never just principles. It was presence, a state of being, an awakening that cannot be reduced to bullet points. And yet, the Kybalion matters. It opened the door for thousands who would have never found the ancient path otherwise. It bridged science and mysticism. It made the esoteric seem possible. But it also began a trend, the packaging of sacred truth into slogans and systems, the risk of trading depth for simplicity, initiation for affirmation. Hermes was not a life coach. He was a flame. And the teachings were not steps to success, but steps back to God. So read the Kybalion, study it, let it spark something ancient. But do not stop there. Go deeper into the source texts, into silence, into direct communion with the field that speaks without words. Because Hermeticism is not just about knowing the laws, it's about becoming the embodiment of them. And when the mind, the breath, and the soul align, you don't need a book to remember. The truth begins to write itself from within. Light and dark, hot and cold, love and fear, expansion and contraction. You were born into a world of opposites, a world of contrast, of tension between extremes. But what if that tension wasn't a mistake? What if it was a secret mechanism through which the universe reveals itself? The Hermetic principle of polarity says this: everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. But, and this is where the mystery opens, opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Love and hate are not separate forces. They are different intensities of the same current. Light and shadow are not enemies. They are conditions of presence. This is not just philosophy. It is architecture. The structure of creation itself, from the heartbeat to the cosmos. Polarity allows for experience, for movement, for growth. Without contrast, there is no perception, no reflection, no transformation. In Hermetic alchemy, this is the dance between Sol and Luna, sun and moon, masculine and feminine, will and receptivity. The great work was never to destroy one side, but to unite them, to create the philosopher's child, the divine offspring of integrated opposites. In Taoism, it is yin and yang, constantly flowing into one another, each containing the seed of the other. Not as conflict, but as balance. And yet, the world teaches you to take sides, to divide, to judge one pole as good, the other as bad, to cling to one and fear the other. This is how the soul gets trapped in illusion. It forgets the purpose of contrast. It resists one half of the current, and in doing so, it becomes fractured. But the Hermetic path is different. It teaches you not to fight duality, but to wield it, to ride the wave, to stand in the center, and see both poles as necessary expressions of the all. Mastery is not achieved by escaping emotion. It is achieved by understanding its spectrum, knowing where you are on the scale, and consciously shifting your vibration. When you feel fear, can you raise it to caution? From caution to curiosity, from curiosity to confidence, from confidence to love. This is transmutation, not by force, but by frequency. The key is awareness, the ability to choose which pole you embody, while holding space for the other to exist. Because the divine doesn't pick sides. It includes them. It creates through contrast. It reveals through reversal. And when you stop judging the dark, you begin to illuminate it. This is the secret of creation, not perfection, but polarity, held in harmony. Because in the heart of the opposites, there is a still point, a silence, a center, and from that center, everything is born. It's everywhere, on hospitals, on coats of arms, on pages of ancient manuscripts, a staff flanked by two serpents, crowned with wings, the Caduceus. Modern minds associate it with medicine, with healing. But that's only a fragment, a shadow. The real meaning was far more powerful. The Caduceus was the staff of Hermes, the symbol of the messenger between worlds, the one who walked between heaven and earth, life and death, matter and mind. But the staff itself was not just a tool, it was a map, a sacred diagram of your inner world and your potential to awaken. At the center, the vertical rod. This is the spine, the axis mundi, the pillar that connects above and below. Winding up either side are the twin serpents, not evil, not dangerous, but alive, vital. They represent the dual currents of energy within you, yin and yang, Ida and Pingala, lunar and solar. In Eastern systems, this is known as Kundalini, the coiled serpent at the base of the spine, dormant until awakened. When stirred through practice, intention, or grace, it begins to rise, not just as energy, but as consciousness. Each twist of the serpents represents a chakra, a center of perception, lessons, initiations. As they spiral upward, they cross at each center, weaving balance into your being, left and right, logic and intuition, will and surrender, and at the top, wings. These are not decoration, they are liberation. The moment the dual forces unite, transcendence occurs. The wings open. The soul remembers it is not bound by flesh, but born of light. This is the hidden promise of the Caduceus, not just healing of the body, but of the soul. Not just medicine, but mastery. Hermes carried it not to command, but to mediate, to bring balance to chaos, to unify the split, to deliver messages from the divine through the language of energy. And when you hold this symbol within, you walk the same path, not of domination, but of alignment, of wielding power through equilibrium. This is why the serpents are not battling, they are dancing. This is why the staff is not crooked, it is steady. This is why the wings are not folded, they are open. Because the one who walks this path no longer swings between extremes. They stand in the center, awake, rooted, radiant. You don't need to wear the Caduceus, you are the Caduceus. And when you live from its truth, your life becomes a staff of light, your choices spiral in wisdom, and your spirit takes flight. The world taught you to run from pain, to bury fear, to silence anger, to wear masks over wounds, and call that healing. But the ancient Hermetic path said something different. It didn't ask you to escape the darkness, it asked you to transmute it. Not by force, not by denial, but by the subtle, powerful art of conscious transformation. This is the hidden alchemy of the mind, the furnace within you, where thought becomes form and suffering becomes sight. Hermeticism teaches that the mind is the first cause, that everything begins in consciousness. So when you feel pain, it's not just chemical, it's meaningful. It's energy, dense, heavy, yes, but movable. And like lead, it contains gold, if you know how to burn it clean. Mental transmutation begins with awareness. You must first see what is arising. The fear, the judgment, the resentment, not as enemies, but as unrefined materials, raw substance, emotional metal, waiting to be melted. Then comes stillness, not to freeze but to feel, to sit inside the discomfort long enough, to hear what it's truly saying, because all emotion is communication. Even fear is a messenger that once served to protect you, but now it may be pointing to a boundary you've outgrown. And then comes the shift, not suppression, not spiritual bypass, but repatterning, to ask, what is the opposite frequency of this feeling? Not to escape into it, but to introduce it as medicine. Can fear become curiosity? Can sadness become reverence? Can shame become insight? This is not fantasy, it's physics. Because the mind does not hold emotion statically. It moves, it flows. And with awareness, you can guide that current. Like a skilled alchemist adjusts the flame. Visualization, affirmation, breathwork. These are tools, yes, but they only work when you bring presence, when you stop identifying with the reaction and start identifying with the one who observes it. Because that witness, the still point behind the storm, is the true you, untouched, unbound, and infinitely capable of transforming any pattern. Through clarity. Hermes didn't teach suppression. He taught transmutation, the art of moving between states, of using mental mastery, not to control life, but to harmonize with it. This is the real philosopher's stone, not a crystal, but a state of mind, a presence so refined that even fear bends to it, even pain softens into light. So don't run, don't numb, don't wait for the fire to die down. Step into it, not to be destroyed, but to remember what cannot be burned. And from that place, you become the flame. Not every prison has bars. Not every cage is visible. Some are made of thoughts, of systems, of stories you were taught to believe, without ever asking who wrote them. This is how control survives, not by chains, but by conviction, by making you believe that the false is true and the true is dangerous. The Gnostics had a name for this. They called them Archons, not demons in fire, but parasites of perception, invisible intelligences that distort reality by distorting your mind. Hermeticism acknowledged them too, not always by name, but by nature. Entities that arise not from the divine source, but from separation, from forgetfulness, from the echo of creation, detached from its origin. The Archons aren't just out there. They operate through systems, through language, through media, through fear wrapped in law, through doubt dressed as science, through control masquerading as protection. They thrive in belief structures that teach you to look outward for salvation, to wait for permission, to see yourself as broken, unworthy, alone. But the Hermetic path has always said the opposite. You are not broken, you are forgotten, and the moment you remember that all is mind, that thought is the seed of form, the Archons lose power, because they can only manipulate what you do not question. They depend on your silence, on your distraction, on your hunger for approval, from a system designed to feed on your doubt. The Gnostic texts speak of a counterfeit reality, a matrix of appearances, built by the demiurge, the blind creator, who mistook himself for God. But the real God, the true source, was beyond all form. It was mind before matter, light before light, and you are part of it. The Archons fear that awakening. They cannot touch the soul, but they can keep the soul asleep. That's why awakening isn't just about love. It's about clarity, about seeing what moves beneath the surface, and reclaiming your power to choose what thoughts you feed, what stories you allow, what voices you echo. Because every time you say, I am not enough, an Archon nods, and every time you say, I remember who I am, one dissolves. This is not about paranoia, it's about perception. It's about taking back the lens through which you see the world. You were never meant to live inside someone else's script. You were meant to write your own. And when you step outside the matrix, the illusion collapses. Because the real battle was never outside. It was always in the realm of belief. Time is not a line, it's a loop, a spiral, a rhythm that repeats itself. Until you learn to dance differently. You've been taught to see time as forward motion, past behind you, future ahead. But the Hermetic masters taught something older, something deeper. Time is a frequency, not a measurement, but a pattern, a wave that pulses through the field of consciousness, shaping moments like the tides shape the shore. The Kybalion speaks of this as the principle of rhythm. Everything flows in and out. Everything rises and falls. Every swing of the pendulum to the left is matched by its swing to the right. This isn't punishment, it's precision. The universe breathing, teaching, resetting. But what happens when you're unaware of the rhythm? You get caught in it, dragged by emotional tides, life events, karmic echoes that feel like fate, but are just unexamined frequency. This is the trap of repetition. The soul keeps walking through the same door, expecting it to lead somewhere new. The same relationships, the same fears, the same patterns of self-abandonment, disguised control. And each time you come back to the same lesson, it arrives a little louder, not as punishment, but as invitation. Hermeticism teaches that you are not a victim of time. You are a tuner of it. You carry within you the ability to change the frequency you're vibrating on. When you do this, time begins to behave differently, not because the world changes, but because your relationship to the rhythm shifts. Instead of being dragged by the pendulum, you learn to ride it, to anticipate its swing, to hold your center as the motion passes through. This is what the mystics called stepping out of karma, not by denying cause and effect, but by no longer reacting unconsciously. To escape the loop, you must bring light to the pattern, observe it, name it, and then act from choice, not from momentum. This is how the soul evolves, not by time passing, but by awareness increasing. The sages said that eternity is not endless time. It's timelessness, a state beyond the pendulum, beyond duality, where presence dissolves the need for repetition. And every time you make a conscious choice, in the face of an old reaction, you shift timelines, you rise. You no longer live on the clock. You live on the rhythm of your own awakening. And in that place, you don't just move through time, you begin to shape it. Because time was never your master. It was your mirror, waiting for you. To remember the rhythm, you came here to change. You were never just a body. You were a temple, not made of stone, but of starlight, structured into matter. The Hermetic masters understood what modern minds forgot. The body is not a trap. It's a vessel, a microcosm of the entire universe, a living echo of the all. As above, so below was not just about stars and atoms. It was about you, your breath, your spine, your skin. Every inch of you mirrors something celestial. Your head, the dome of the heavens. Your spine, the staff of Hermes. Your two hemispheres, sun and moon. Your heart, the sacred fire, pumping rhythm like the pulse of the cosmos. The Egyptians knew this. They mapped constellations onto bones, organs onto deities. They understood that healing meant alignment, not just of muscle, but of memory. The temple was not just a place to worship. It was a shape to become. The Hermetic texts described the human being as an intermediary between earth and sky, the one creature who stands upright, touching both worlds, mortal but divine in essence. Even your breath is a prayer, an invisible thread that binds you to the source. Inhale, receive spirit. Exhale, release form. You are born again. Every single breath. Your cells respond to thought. Your posture reflects belief. Your body records what your soul forgets. But it also remembers when you do. This is why sacred movement matters. Why posture is more than mechanics. Why touch, stillness, sound, all activate dormant codes within you. Because the body is encoded with geometry, golden ratios, sacred angles, every joint, every chakra, a gate, a lock, a key. And when you treat the body as sacred, it begins to respond. It begins to awaken, not just in strength, but in frequency. The temples of old were designed to reflect the body, and your body, in turn, was designed to reflect the cosmos. So when you heal the body, you don't just fix tissue, you restore a forgotten harmony between the inner and the infinite. You return to rhythm, to balance, to sovereignty. Hermeticism never asked you to escape the body. It asked you to inhabit it fully, to treat it like the altar it is, to walk like a priest in the church of your own being. Because light doesn't just shine above you, it lives inside you, waiting to be remembered in every step, every breath, every sacred choice. You are not a body with a soul. You are a soul shaped into light, wearing a body as its most perfect vessel. There is more than one world, more than one layer of reality, and you exist in all of them. You are not just flesh, not just mind, not just spirit. You are a bridge between three realms, each vibrating at a different frequency, each shaping your experience, whether you're aware of it or not. The Hermetic tradition speaks of three great planes: the material, the astral, and the causal. Three mirrors, three levels of the one flame. The material world is the most familiar. It is the realm of form, of gravity, of sensation and structure. It's where the soul comes to sculpt, to learn by doing, to touch the density of creation and leave fingerprints on time. But behind the visible is the astral world, the world of emotion, of energy, of dream. Here, thoughts become places. Desires shape landscapes. This is the realm you enter when you sleep, when you imagine, when you pray. It is fluid, mutable, and charged with symbolic intelligence. The astral world is not fantasy. It is the subtle interface between matter and meaning. And everything that manifests in the physical was born here first. Above both is the causal world, the plane of ideas, the soul's memory. It is stillness before movement, seed before sprout, essence before identity. Here live the archetypes, the eternal patterns that shape everything below, the gods, the blueprints, the pure intentions of the divine mind, before they become vibration. When you connect to the causal, you touch the source code of your life. You begin to see not just what's happening, but why it's happening. You begin to align with your soul's true direction, not just the noise of emotion or the gravity of survival. These three worlds are not stacked like stairs. They interpenetrate. Right now, as you sit in the material, you are also vibrating in the astral and echoing into the causal. Your thoughts ripple upward. Your emotions ripple outward. Your presence ripples downward. The alchemist learns to navigate all three, to act in matter, feel in energy, and anchor from the eternal. This is the triple flame, the integrated fire. That makes you whole. Ignore the higher, and life becomes reactive. Ignore the lower, and life becomes ungrounded. But when you walk with awareness, in all three realms, you become a conscious creator. Not just a reaction, but a revelation. You begin to live, not just in the world, but through it. With the clarity of soul, the strength of form, and the flame of purpose, burning in all three places at once. One body, one mind, one origin, three worlds, one flame. Before the light was seen, a word was spoken. "Let there be light" was not just divine poetry. It was the revelation of how form emerges from frequency. Sound came first, not noise, not language as we know it, but vibration, movement, the breath of the all, stirring the still waters of the unmanifest. The Hermetic texts speak of the word as logos, not just speech, but intelligent vibration, a force that organizes chaos into cosmos, that gives shape to thought and form to desire. The ancients knew this. They chanted, they sang, they spoke names of power, not to worship blindly, but to align with the patterns behind the veil. Every syllable, every tone is a carrier wave of intention, and intention is the true sculptor of energy. Modern science is slowly catching up. Through cymatics, we've seen how sound arranges matter. A single frequency can turn sand into sacred geometry. A chant can alter water. A word can affect the nervous system, the brain, the very structure of the body. Because you are made of vibration. Every cell hums, every organ resonates. Your bones are singing in silence. When you speak, you are not just expressing, you are impressing, sending ripples into the field that respond with form. This is why mantras exist, why prayers echo across traditions. Because repetition with awareness is frequency carved into reality, but the real power of sound is not in repetition, it's in resonance. When the word you speak matches the truth you carry, the universe listens differently. "Let there be light" wasn't a command. It was a release, the unlocking of potential. Through alignment, you do the same. Every time you speak from soul, when you say, "I am ready," and mean it. When you say, "I forgive," and feel it. When you say, "I remember," and something inside you wakes. Your words are not casual, they are creative. They are spells, prayers, scripts of the soul. To speak unconsciously is to program the field blindly, but to speak with clarity, intention, and presence is to write new architecture into your own timeline. Hermeticism doesn't ask you to speak more. It asks you to speak truer, to treat the voice as sacred, to shape each word like a sculptor shapes stone, because the word was with God, and the word was God, and you, made in that image, carry the same spark. You don't just speak into reality, you speak it alive. So choose your words, like light chooses direction, and watch the world begin to echo them back. There is a temple within you that no one sees, not made of marble or candlelight or ancient chants, but of silence and knowing and return. Inside that temple, two figures walk together. One speaks, one listens, one remembers. One is still learning how. The student and the master. Both are you. You've been taught to look for teachers outside, books, gurus, systems, and they have their place. They point the way, they open doors. But the true initiation was never something given. It was something activated, something already written into the fabric of your soul. Before you were born, you don't need to know the language of alchemy to begin purifying your thoughts. You don't need to memorize the Kybalion to begin transmuting your fear. Because initiation is not about words, it's about remembrance. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you are being initiated. Every time you sit in your own fire, instead of running from it, you are being initiated. Every time you pause before reacting, witness the pattern, and choose differently, you are being initiated. These moments are not small, they are sacred. Hermeticism was never about external ceremony. It was about the internal shifts that open you to a higher order of perception. And as you evolve, the student begins to recognize the master, not as someone above, but as a presence within. Steady, wise, patient. The voice that doesn't shout, but waits. The knowing that doesn't argue, but rings true. This master within is not your ego. It's not your ambition. It's the part of you that never forgot who you were. It has guided you through dreams, through déjà vu, through the strange peace that descends right before a breakthrough. And even when you feel lost, disconnected, spiritually amnesiac, it is there, watching, waiting, until you're ready to sit down in stillness and ask again. The Hermetic path honors this inner relationship. It reminds you that the scrolls you seek are hidden in your heartbeat, that the answers you chase are encoded in your breath. You don't become a master by accumulating knowledge. You become a master by integrating it, by embodying it, by living it. When no one is watching, the student learns, the master becomes. And when these two meet, when they bow to each other in the temple of your own being, something awakens, a flame, not taught, not forced, but remembered. And from that flame you begin to walk the path, not just as a seeker, but as one who remembers the way. Nothing happens by accident. Nothing is random. Even the forgotten moments are part of a deeper rhythm. This is the law of cause and effect. Every thought, every word, every action is a seed, and every seed carries within it the shape of its eventual fruit. Hermeticism teaches this not as superstition, but as structure. The universe is not chaotic. It is alive. It listens, and it responds. Whatever you send into the field comes back, not because you are being judged, but because the field is balanced, because energy must complete its circuit. When you think a thought, you set a vibration in motion. When you act from intention, you initiate a pattern. And whether that pattern unfolds immediately or takes lifetimes, it will return. This is what many call karma. But in Hermeticism, karma is not punishment. It's correction. It is the movement of energy toward harmony, toward remembrance, toward home. And it is always intelligent. Even your pain, even your delays, even the detours that broke your heart were not meaningless. They were echoes from something you once thought or said or chose, not as blame, but as reflection. Because you are not a victim of your life. You are its artist, and every brushstroke counts. This is why presence matters, why intention matters, why forgiveness isn't about letting others off the hook. It's about stopping the echo from repeating. The Hermetic student doesn't fear karma. They study it. They learn to track the current back to its source. They ask, why did I create this? What belief shaped this moment? What unhealed wound drew this in? And then, with clarity, they choose again. Because that's the hidden gift of this law. You're not just bound by cause and effect, you are also a cause. In motion. You don't have to wait for karma to find you. You can begin to shape it, right now, with every conscious thought, every new pattern, every small act of grace. When the old pattern would have screamed, and when you align with the field, when your thoughts, words, and actions form a single, clear signal. You no longer live in reaction. You begin to live in creation. The law of cause and effect is not there to trap you. It's there to wake you, to remind you that the universe is listening, and it always answers with what you truly believe. So believe wisely, speak wisely, live wisely, because no moment is wasted. Not in this system, not in this field. Every choice is a prayer. Every act is an offering, and every moment is a mirror that eventually returns to show you who you've become. Initiation is not the beginning, it is the return. You don't become something new. You remember what you've always been, buried beneath layers of culture, trauma, survival, and forgetting. The ancient mystery schools knew this. Whether in Egypt, in Greece, or deep within the Hermetic temples, initiation was never about teaching. It was about awakening, not information, but revelation. You were led into darkness, not to be blinded, but so your inner sight would open. You were spoken to in symbols, not to confuse, but to activate, to stir something wordless inside you that already knew the truth. The great teachings were never shouted, they were whispered, because only the soul could hear them. Initiation began long before you stepped into the temple. It began the moment you questioned the world, the moment you asked, "Is this all there is?" The moment something cracked open in you, and silence answered louder than any voice. In Hermetic tradition, the path is called the return to the all. You are not gaining power. You are removing distortion. You are peeling away illusion until the light underneath becomes visible again. This is why true initiates were sworn to secrecy, not because the teachings were dangerous, but because they were sacred. And sacred things lose their power when spoken into places that cannot yet hold them. Initiation was not given. It was earned through inner alignment, through patience, through presence, through letting go of who you thought you were, so the real self could emerge. There were no grades, no certificates, only thresholds, only mirrors, only silence and symbols, and the knowing gaze of the guide, who saw the flame in you before you did. And when the moment came, when the teachings touched your bones, instead of just your mind, you didn't say, "I've learned something new." You said, "I remember," because the soul is ancient, and what is true has always been true. You are not here to collect spiritual ideas. Like souvenirs, you are here to become what you've always known. The temple is no longer made of stone. It is your body, your breath, your choice. And initiation still happens every time you choose love over fear, every time you recognize a pattern and break it, every time you feel the tremble of remembering move through your chest like an echo from 1,000 lives ago. You have done this before, and now you're doing it again, not to become awakened, but because you already are, and you are simply remembering how to walk with your light. On. You were taught to seek God in the sky, in temples, in books, in someone holier than you, someone cleaner, closer. But the Hermetic path always said the opposite. The divine is not far, it's not distant, it's not hiding. It's you, in a higher state of clarity. You, without distortion. You, remembered. The ancient Hermetic texts speak of the divine mind, the all, the source, the one thing that gives rise to all things. It is not a being, it is being itself, not bound by form, but vibrating through every form that ever was. And it is not above you, it is within you. because mind is not something you have. It's what you are. The divine doesn't live outside of creation. It lives through it. It becomes the stars, the oceans, the spirals in your DNA, and the quiet voice that says, "Wake up." The Hermetic sages taught that everything is mind, and if all is mind, then the essence of the all lives within you. Not symbolically, literally. You are a thought in the divine mind, and that mind is thinking itself through you. This is why consciousness matters, why presence matters, because every time you think with love, you are tuning yourself back to the original signal. And when you think with fear, you are stepping out of alignment, not from punishment, but from forgetfulness. The Hermetic path is not about worship, it's about integration, becoming one with the source, by remembering that you were never truly separate. You were not cast out, you fell asleep, and now you are stirring. The divine mind is not some unreachable God. It is the stillness behind your thoughts, the clarity that arises when the ego dissolves, the quiet joy that returns when you stop pretending to be small. You touch it in meditation, in awe, in heartbreak that cracks you open, instead of breaking you down. And once you touch it, even for a moment, nothing is ever the same. You begin to speak differently, walk differently, not because you're better, but because you're realer, more empty of illusion, more full of light. You stop seeking permission to be divine. You start living like you remember, because the divine mind never left you. It only waited. And now that you've begun to hear it again, not as a voice from beyond, but as a pulse inside your own being, the path ahead becomes clear, not forward, but inward. And step by step, you return to the source. That was never far, because it was always you. There is a shape behind the veil, a motion that repeats itself, not in a straight line, but in rhythm, in return, in revelation, the spiral. It's not just art, it's architecture, the signature of the divine mind, writ into creation itself. You can see it in a seashell, in the curve of a fern, in the path a hawk traces, as it rises on warm wind, in the swirl of a hurricane, in the spin of a galaxy, in the double helix inside your very body. This is not coincidence. It is pattern. It is precision. It is the golden ratio, phi, an irrational number that flows like breath through the structure of the living world. Hermeticism teaches that the universe is not random. It is composed through sacred mathematics, not cold numbers, but living relationships. Phi is not just a ratio. It's a relationship between parts and the whole. The part reflects the whole, and the whole contains the part. This is the embodiment of as above, so below, in form. The spiral is the visible expression of that divine order. It is movement that never repeats, yet never loses its center. It expands, but always with memory, with grace, with rhythm. This is how your soul unfolds, not in a straight path, but in spirals. You return to the same place, but with new awareness. You revisit old wounds, but with new eyes. Each cycle deeper, richer, closer to center. The spiral doesn't trap you, it frees you by allowing you to return without repeating. Temples were built in spirals. Vortex points on Earth follow spiral energy lines. Even sound moves in spirals. Energy fields, torus flows, the breath itself. In and out, rising and falling, spiraling through the body like prayer. The Hermetic initiate understands this. They don't fear returning. They walk the spiral consciously. They learn that every rotation is an initiation, another chance to choose love, to choose clarity, to refine the self again. Even time moves this way, not a line, but a spiral of cycles, seasons, ages, incarnations. Each round, a new octave of being. And deep within you, the spiral lives too, in the DNA that writes your form, in the kundalini that rises through your spine, in the path your thoughts take, when they begin to spiral outward, into reality. You are made of that motion. You are carried by it. You are not lost. When you feel yourself circling, you are being called inward, back to the center. You never left, just as the spiral always returns, but never repeats. Because the sacred spiral is not just a shape, it is a memory, and it's calling you home. There is a reason you were never taught this, a reason the scrolls were burned, the temples desecrated, the symbols inverted. It was never just about doctrine, it was about power. Because Hermeticism didn't teach obedience, it taught sovereignty. It didn't place the divine on a throne in the sky, but in the mirror. And that was dangerous. The church rose in a time of empire. It needed order, uniformity, control. It needed a single God, a single book, a single gatekeeper between humanity and heaven. But Hermeticism was older, wider. It whispered of the all, of the soul's immortality, of a divine mind that lived in everything, not just in a building, not just through a priest. The early Hermetic texts spoke of gnosis, direct knowledge, not blind faith, not belief under threat, but experience of the sacred firsthand. They taught that the universe was alive, that every human held a spark of the source, that heaven and earth were not enemies, but reflections. And perhaps most threatening of all, they taught that no institution, no mediator, no authority was needed to access the divine. So the scrolls were hidden, the initiates persecuted, the great libraries burned. The Corpus Hermeticum, once studied alongside Plato and Aristotle, was buried beneath centuries of silence. Only fragments survived. In Alexandria, knowledge was not destroyed by ignorance, but by design, because the ruling powers understood a free mind cannot be ruled, and Hermeticism set minds free. It taught inner alchemy. It revealed the mechanics of manifestation. It showed how thought shapes form, how sound becomes structure, how the soul remembers itself through rhythm, symbol, and will. None of this could be controlled by empire, so it was outlawed, demonized, twisted into shadows. The serpent, once sacred, became a curse. The feminine, once honored, became shame. The spiral, once divine, it became forbidden. But truth doesn't vanish, it waits. And the Hermetic flame, though buried, never died. It lived in secret orders, in symbols carved into cathedral walls, in whispered chants, in stained glass windows. That carried geometry older than scripture. And now, it lives in you, waking, because the time of suppression is ending, and the knowledge once guarded in temples is now rising through hearts. This is why you feel the call, why the old teachings stir something deep. Not because they are new, but because they were never meant to be forgotten. And when you reclaim them, you do more than remember history. You reclaim your inheritance. There comes a moment when the student stops asking, not because they know everything, but because they finally understand. Where knowing begins, the scrolls were only symbols, the teachers were only mirrors, and all the temples you bowed before were built to point you inward. This is the moment you realize you are the magus, the one who once begged for light, now carries it in their eyes. The one who trembled before the mystery, now walks with it folded in their breath. You are no longer just a seeker. You are a participant. In the unfolding of reality, the magus doesn't follow. They tune. They align. They understand that the universe is not commanded. It is invited. And the invitation is vibration. Thought becomes current. Intention becomes architecture. Action becomes spell. But the magus doesn't act for power. They act from presence. Because true magic is not about control. It's about coherence. You don't manipulate the world. You move in rhythm with it. And when you do, the world begins to reflect. The order you carry within, the staff you hold, is your will. The robe you wear is your clarity. The flame you wield is your devotion. You do not seek signs. You create them. You do not chase approval. You radiate truth, not to be worshipped, but to remind others that they carry the same flame. In Hermetic tradition, the magus is not a title. It is a state, a fusion of knowledge and embodiment, of vision and groundedness, of silence and speech that shapes. When you reach this point, you no longer need the ritual, because you are the ritual. You become the circle, the altar, the flame. Every breath is ceremony. Every step, sacred geometry in motion. And this power, this still, electric presence, is not borrowed. It's not given. It's remembered. You've walked lifetimes for this, crossed temples and betrayals and awakenings and forgetting. And now, here you stand. Not because you know everything, but because you finally trust. What speaks through your own being? The magus knows when to act and when to listen, when to focus and when to release. They know that reality responds, not to the loudest voice, but to the most aligned frequency. And when your frequency matches the truth, reality bends to reflect it, not because you force it, but because you become it. You are no longer becoming. You are arriving. And every time you choose to walk this earth, as one who remembers, who speaks with clarity, who creates with love, you leave a trail of sparks for others to follow, not as a master, but as a flame. Your thoughts are not isolated. Your mind is not sealed. It is not a container. It is a mirror. And what it reflects is not just your personal history, but the all itself. The Hermetic teachings begin with this truth. All is mind, not metaphor, not metaphorical suggestion, but reality. Mind is the substance, the origin, the architecture of everything you see. And your consciousness, that flicker of awareness behind your eyes, is not separate from that. It is part of it, not a drop in the ocean, but the ocean reflecting through a single drop. You are not an observer of the divine. You are the lens through which it observes itself. Every time you become aware, you make the all aware of itself. And every time you forget, you dim the mirror, but you never break it. The mirror cannot be shattered, only covered. This is why clarity matters, not because it's moral, but because it's magnetic. The clearer your mind, the more accurately it reflects the deeper currents of truth. This is not about intellect, it's about resonance. A mind filled with judgment, distraction, and fear becomes a funhouse mirror, distorting the image of the one. But a mind stilled, purified, that made luminous with attention and presence, begins to reflect the all with precision. This is the sacred task of consciousness, to remember what it's part of, to stop thinking it owns thought, and realize it is being thought through. You are not the source. You are the instrument, the flute, the lens, the polished mirror on which eternity paints itself. When you realize this, your identity shifts. You stop saying, "This is my thought." You start asking, what is this thought reflecting? Is it fear from the small self? Or is it wisdom from the One? Is it distortion from trauma? Or clarity from presence? Hermeticism teaches that the divine mind is reflected in every layer of creation, in galaxies, in spirals, in symbols, in you. Your mind is not just a tool. It is a temple, a site of communion between the finite and the infinite. And the more you align with love, truth, stillness, the more your mirror becomes clean, the more the all can see through you. And that seeing is what changes the world, because once a single soul remembers that its mind is a reflection of the divine, everything begins to reorder around it. The mirror does not create the light, but it reveals it, it multiplies it, it carries it across time, and in doing so, it becomes a living part of the one it reflects. It was never truly gone, just hidden, whispered about in silence, buried beneath centuries of noise. But now, the ether is rising. The fifth element, once erased from textbooks, dismissed by dogma, reduced to myth, is returning to memory, not because science has evolved, but because consciousness has. The ancients knew this element. They called it by many names: ether, akasha, spirit, the breath of the divine, the invisible sea in which all things move and through which all things are connected. It was the womb of form, the carrier of thought, the matrix of manifestation. And when it was suppressed, something in the world dimmed, not because the field disappeared, but because we stopped feeling it. Now the veil thins again. You feel it in synchronicity, in the way your thoughts ripple reality, in the still moments when silence speaks louder than words. You feel it in the tingling before clarity, in the dreams that come true, in the knowing that rises without logic. This is the return of the ether, not as a theory, but as a presence. Science calls it the zero-point field. Mystics call it the Akashic current. Hermeticism simply calls it the fifth element, the bridge between the mental and the material, between the all and the many. And now that bridge is opening again, because the ether never left. We did. We turned our attention outward, away from silence, away from the breath beneath breath. But the ether has waited. It has carried every thought, every prayer, every act of love or fear, holding it like memory in light. And now it stirs again, because enough souls are listening, enough minds are clearing, enough hearts are softening. The field responds to presence. It quickens when we align. It echoes when we speak with truth. The veil was never meant to be permanent. It was only a phase in forgetting. But when the soul begins to remember, when the spiral completes its turn, when the mirror becomes still enough to reflect the all, the ether returns, not to take over, but to complete the circle. You are not separate from it. You are it. Form shaped by mind, mind shaped by presence, presence returning to the field it came from. And now, with each breath, you weave that field again. You walk between worlds. You carry the fifth element, not as myth, but as memory, because the veil is thinner than you think, and the ether is not coming. It is here, waiting for you to walk with it. Awake. If something ancient stirred inside you as you listened, that wasn't coincidence. It was remembrance. Because the Hermetic path doesn't just teach you the truth, it helps you remember that you are always part of it. If this journey lit a spark in your spirit, don't let it fade. Let it become a fire. Subscribe, not just to a channel, but to the path that's calling you home. Comment below and share what awakened in you. Your voice may be the mirror someone else is waiting for, like this video. If it spoke to a part of you that words alone can't reach, and share it with someone who's ready to remember. Because this knowledge was never meant to stay hidden. It was meant to rise again, through us, through you. Welcome to the hidden voyage. Welcome home. Soul Whisper and Soul Creator, the hidden voyage.